solve that flooding issue that I talked about earlier. And another issue, important issue that we look into when considering wind turbines is the noise level. Unfortunately, we're not able to find noise regulations provided by the Tongan government. However, most developing countries such as Germany, Sweden, and US have wind turbine noise limits between 50 to 60 decibels. Through a study done in Fairhaven, Massachusetts, the result shows that at a wind speed between 5.6 to 8.0 meters per second, the sound level at the wind turbine is about 110 decibels. However, in order to reduce that sound level to an acceptable level, we will have to move our wind turbines roughly about 250 feet outside of residential areas. And then I'm going to hand it over to Derek, who's going to talk to you a little more in detail about the specific technology that we're looking to implement.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm going to start with wind, our wind technology. As Cody mentioned, we chose the Vestas VA2 wind turbine to help supplement power to Tonga. It is rated at 1.65 megawatts and is designed to be optimized in low to medium wind speed conditions, which I'll touch on what that means here in just a second. But first, a distinguishing factor of these series of turbines is the OptiTip protocols that change the longitudinal pitch of the blades to optimize the angle of attack into the wind, which allows for better power generation for a particular wind zone and for more economical power generation. To the right, we just have a picture of a Vestas VA2. Just for your reference, there's been over 1,400 of these installed worldwide. So it's a proven technology. We feel comfortable using it, and we feel comfortable moving forward with that particular turbine. The bottom picture, the bottom graph shows wind speeds over various months of the year for Tonga over the period of 14 years. From satellite data, it was surveyed to have an average wind speed of 6.5 meters per second at 50 meters. This is class 3 wind, which also fits under low to medium wind speed conditions. And it's something to keep in mind that we will be able to use the turbine to get the power we need as we move forward. Solar PV is proven technology that Tonga has shown interest in implementing for power generation. The most proven PV technologies around are single and multi-crystal silicon cells. Single crystal silicon is more expensive but is more efficient, whereas multi-crystal silicon is less efficient but less expensive. Right now, we've been looking more towards the multi-crystal silicon cells, but we're going to continue to refine and look at more varieties of solar panels and solar arrays to discover which is best for our system. And recently mentioned by Jackie was the 3/4 megawatt PV plant on Tonga Tatu. Here to the right is just a display of the architecture of that PV array. It was established by the New Zealand company, as Jackie mentioned, Meridian Energy. The bottom picture shows that the solar price has declined over the last 12 years, 14 years, by over 50% since 1998. And we hope that prices continue to decrease as we move towards phase 2 of the project. As was mentioned earlier, if the wave technology, Polaris wave technology that I'm about to go into more detail, does not work out or is not developed in the way that we see fit, we can look towards the wave and the solar, and knowing that they will continue to be developed and continue to drop in price is good for our hopes to decrease the cost of energy on Tonga as we move forward. Polaris wave technology is young but shows promise as a baseline source of energy in the future. It is developed by the Scottish company, Polaris Wave Technology. It's been established in 2 different places currently, offshore connected to the UK grid and offshore connected to the Portugal's grid. And it has shown that it has worked, it has generated electricity, and it is continually being developed as we speak. We see a picture here of the Polaris Wave architecture, Polaris Wave system. It works essentially you have semi-submerged sections in the water that oscillate with the waves and incite motion of hydraulic fluid, which moves or turns a hydraulic motor, which in turn drives a generator to produce electricity. The bottom picture shows a potential placement of our wave turbines. Wave energies are higher on Tonga Tapu's southern shore This is good to note because the northern shore and northern areas are where the cyclones and typhoons that Jackie mentioned earlier tend to hit first. So we decrease risk of injury to our system by placing them in the south. We are also out of the way of coastal navigation routes if we place our systems to the south, which will prevent man-made objects such as ships from hitting them. That would, of course, be terrible. And phase 2 could see implementation of the Plamis P2, which is an improvement on the current P1 design that has already been installed. So we hope that by the time we hit phase 2 of that project, we have fresh, newer technology to look at as we analyze the system to go to 100% renewable efficiency energy. And our storage technology, lithium-ion batteries that have been determined to be the best fit for our system and design right now. They offer the best performance at the lowest cost for our system size and extended storage needs. It is highly efficient and well proven. Our picture to the right here is in Laurel Mountain, West Virginia. We see a battery bank here for a wind turbine farm. The battery bank, it has about 32 megawatts of battery buffering capacity for a 98 megawatt wind turbine farm. This is good, showing that this technology has been used for storage applications in systems much larger than the system that we are currently designing in Tonga. And just down here we have, not well shown, just a brief display of the technical maturity of the lithium-ion battery. It is a more developed technology. It is a maturing technology, and we hope that we will, and we're designing around a 10-year lifespan for our batteries in the system. And with that, I'd like to pass it off to Danny, who will talk more about the business plan.
Thanks, Derek. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the business plan. The team has been working to engage some external stakeholders to help us define our business plan. This is obviously not our area of expertise. We've been working with Dr. Doherty and Marshall Tuck out of the business school, as well as Ray Mann, who worked to develop a geothermal project in Akutan, put together a business plan for that project, so he's been lending us some of his assistance as well. The diagram that we have right here was made for us by Marshall, and it just kind of shows how our organization will fit into marketing this system that we're designing. So right in the middle you see VT REEF LLC. We're going to design this renewable energy system. We are going to be able to license the system for use on other island nations that are similar to Tonga. And then we're going to subcontract out the construction of the system. So in order to build the system, we would love to get grants and financing from places like the IMF or the World Bank, but you'll see in a minute we've also made a financial analysis where we can obtain financing from traditional capital markets with high rates of return in order to build this system. So contract out the construction of the energy facility, and then VT REEF will own and operate the energy facility and sell power to the existing grid on Tonga, to the Tonga government. Tonga Power Limited is the utility. So moving forward, we'll talk, this is the financial model that we've been working on, just to kind of give us a rough idea about how our project looks, if it's financially feasible or not. So you can see in year 0, we're going to obtain debt financing for the entire value of the capital expenditure to build the project. That's $140 million. And then starting in year 1, we'll be generating electricity. So the top line revenue is just the number of kilowatt hours that we'll generate times the price that we'll charge for electricity, which is shown here to be 57 cents. That's calculated to be close to our break-even point with a one-phase system. So the next line is the cost of goods sold. That takes into account the operating and maintenance cost of running the plant. So that's about 6 cents a kilowatt hour times the same number of kilowatt hours that we'll be able to generate in a year. We have depreciation, straight line depreciation for the 30-year life of this equipment. We've used a 10-year life of the batteries, so 30 years for the solar panels and wind turbines, 10 years for the battery array. So that gets us to our earnings, and then we have an interest payment using an extremely high cost of capital of 17%. We got that cost of capital from studying other renewable energy projects that have been put into place that have been financed with similar weighted average cost of capital. And then we're showing a loss here, so we won't be paying taxes, added back depreciation to give us our operating cash flow for the year. In year 10, we show a $40 million capital expenditure. That's when the batteries have lived out their useful life, so they'll all have to be replaced every 10 years. So you see at year 10 and 20, capital expenditure to buy new batteries, and then a cash flow from selling off the equipment at the end of 30 years. So like I said, this is Our break-even point for the cost of electricity is between 56 and 57 cents. So this is showing a net present value of $70,000. That's as close as we could get it with round numbers to zero. So we can see here that the high initial capital cost and the high investment risk, which mandates that high weighted average cost of capital, mandate that we develop the project in 2 phases and try and find lower cost capital financing because the net present value, that's a pretty high cost of electricity to generate such a small net present value. So coming out of this analysis, we've decided to break the project down into 2 phases. We've also discussed other reasons for that decision, such as making it easier to integrate with the current grid. But it provides us some flexibility with our financing. So here you see the system broken down into 2 phases that we talked about earlier. 50% met by wind and solar to begin with until year 10, and then at year 10, implementing some tidal power. This works out also because the expected lifetime of the tidal system is 20 years, so that gives us the full 30 years if we implement it after 10 years. And it allows us to break down our capital expenditure into 2 big chunks. In addition, you'll see that we've added here 2 different weighted average costs of capital. So the idea behind that was that after we've been operating for 10 years and generating positive cash flows, it will be easier to obtain lower cost capital financing. And you can see that when we break it down into 2 phases, with the same cost of electricity, we now have generated $1.4 million in net present value. So that's a fairly conservative estimate. 57 cents is well below the current 88 cents that they're paying in Tonga for electricity, and those are still very high weighted average cost of capital. So we've shown a more aggressive scenario where we charge 70 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity, which is a 20% reduction from the 88 cents that they're currently paying. So that would be what we market to Tonga Power Limited, the Tongan government. And if we can find a little bit more conservative financing with weighted average cost of capital at 14%, and then after 10 years bumping that down to 12%, you can see we can generate a net present value of close to $50 million. So in addition to the financial analysis that goes into the business plan, we need to include some other relevant considerations that are a little bit less technical. So there are some political considerations that need to be taken into account. The government of Tonga is a constitutional monarchy, and they own and operate Tonga Power Limited, which is the national utility. So we've been working to make contact with someone on Tonga to get an understanding for how open they are to these kinds of ideas. We're encouraged by the Tonga Energy Roadmap, this initiative that they have to move towards renewable energy, but we realize that these are considerations we need to discuss within the business plan. In addition to political considerations, there are some social considerations. So we need to consider the lifestyle impacts of renewable energy and intermittent sources of electricity, so people not wanting to see wind turbines on their coastline. And we also need to make sure that we can always meet 100% of grid demand, because we don't want people to have to be without electricity just because we came in and built this system for them. One of the other things that we're talking about is quantifying the greenhouse gas emissions reduction that we'll get from getting rid of the diesel generation on the island. So that's a huge benefit that we can propose to the Tongan government when we go to them. So that will be included in the business plan. In addition, we're talking about real estate and tourism. So we're going to site the project in a way that minimizes the impact on scenic vistas. Tourism is one of the big industries on the island. And in addition, we're somewhat land constrained. So we've been doing some research to understand land values in the area and be able to include that in our financial modeling. And then finally, grid integration will be considered in our business model. Because they do have an existing grid, we'd like to smoothly integrate with that grid and avoid disruptions. So moving on from the business model, I'm going to pass off to Dan, who's going to talk about our Simulink model.
Thanks, Danny. So as a quick recap, the team started